evening. We have a much larger crowd than we expected, so welcome all of you. Very nice to see you. We are presenting tonight Matt Carcieri, who's going to speak to us about Frenchtown. He's going to provide a virtual tour of some significant spots in this area of town. I'm in the old section, so I don't know much about Frenchtown. I'll enjoy it very much. And Matt's been very good. I'm sure his research is thorough. He comes from a marketing and advertising background, so he's a very good presenter. I think you'll enjoy it.
Thanks. Thank you, Tom, and thank you everybody for coming out on a cold, dark November night. I really didn't expect to see this many people. I thought everybody would be sitting on their couch saying, nah, we'll watch it on video. So, but you are history diehards, and I salute you, so thank you for being here. We also want to thank Randy, is he in the back? Yeah, Randy's in the back. Wave hi, Randy. Randy's the director and president of the Survivalist Sea Museum. So we are very grateful for him for hosting us tonight. And we'll put you to work here with all these chairs, Randy. Sorry, thank you very much. Awesome. The other thing I want to mention at the outset is today is Giving Tuesday, and there are a lot of nonprofits like Randy's that could use some help. So feel free to think about that as you go home tonight. So. With that, I want to get the show started with a little quiz. Now, it's not going to be any grades, but I kind of want you to get to know what's in your head a little bit as we think about the subject of Frenchtown. So, my first question to you is, what are the boundaries of Frenchtown? Frenchtown is kind of an idea, I think, more than a geography. My sister was up front, kind of made me feel a little silly one day when I thought Frenchtown was like massively expansive, and she kind of cut me down. So, yeah, what's kind of interesting what's in your head? Yeah, what's the northern boundary of Frenchtown? What do you think?
From South Road, Frenchtown Road to South Road up to Shippingtown, and then back down. One about a square mile.
Shippingtown, wait, Shippingtown, okay, that's we take it on that side. But Frenchtown Road would be the north part. Yeah?
This side.
Yeah, this side.
This side is
Yep, okay. Others agree with that? What else? Because again, I don't know if it's defined. Yeah, your thoughts? You think it goes all the way to Carcieri? Yep, okay. And how far north? Middle road. Up the middle road, maybe. Yeah. Up the middle road. Okay. That was my sister, another sister who had a phone. Okay, good. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that topic. How about just rough sense? I don't know. Do you have a feeling for how many 18th century farmhouses exist in this area? 6, yes? 15. 10? 4. All right. I'll show you if I can do it. And then lastly, does anybody know how you pronounce that word right there? Because A-roll. Thank you, because I'm going to be saying it a lot. I'm going to be saying A-roll. Okay. Because I know in French, well, I should ask. Where's my French speaker? I got a French speaker. There it is. Okay. How do we say it in French? A-roll. A-roll. Okay, you're going to help me with that a few times. But okay, but for the East Greenwich folks, I'm going to say A-roll. Is that right? Okay, A-roll. Okay. Good.
Every time you want to say it, just point to her.
Yes, exactly. So here's something interesting I found at Town Hall. It's down at Town Hall, and here's a map of all the different sections of the town. And I don't know how well you can see this. I apologize for the resolution. Well, there's going to be a lot of grainy pictures today. That's great. Thank you for that. Yeah. Now you might go to sleep, but oh well, it's nice to see. But you can see, interestingly here, what the town calls Frenchtown is kind of bordered by Frenchtown Road and Tillinghast Road. Over here they call this West of Frenchtown. Everything west is west of Frenchtown. And everything north of Frenchtown Road they call Fry's Hamlet, where the Fry's Farm is. And we have some Bailey here back to talk about that too. But so interestingly, the town kind of calls Frenchtown that very kind of tightly defined section. So for this presentation, I want you to know, I just kind of focused on that area because there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about. My presentation is going to be really focused on that area today, bounded by Frenchtown Road and Tillinghast Road. On the east, I think it was always the edge of town, and the south, always the south border of town. So that's at least the definition I'll be using today. So what I've also found through digging around, I've been into this town history thing for a few years now, and I've also found 11 farmhouses in that vicinity. Again, bounded by the bounds I showed you, about 11 in town, and sorry, in that vicinity, 11 farmhouses. These two are really significant. This is the Richard Briggs farmhouse you're familiar with, of course, the Prince Roach farm down the South Road. That's one of the oldest structures in town, as is again the Briggs farm, probably goes back as far as 1717 on Tillinghast Road. So those really are two of the oldest structures in town anywhere. There's a couple also down in the village area we can talk about another time. Come to another one of our talks, we'll talk about that. But those are significant. Also, interestingly, these four are all on Frenchtown Road. You probably recognize a couple of these as you drive up and down Frenchtown Road. But they're all were built by a member of the Green family, as you can see. They all have Green, and not the Daniel Green, but another part of the Green branch, all built there. So you probably know that because of this Green, the presence of the Greens on Frenchtown Road, the intersection of Frenchtown Road and South County Trail is commonly known as Green's Corner. Most of the generation is kind of known as Green's Corner because of all those members of the Green family that were farming along Frenchtown Road. And then we have all these homes, the rest of these homes are along Tillinghast Road, and what you may or may not know is that that is actually a historic district. So most of Tillinghast Road is actually a historic district. It's actually on the National Register of Historic Places, all this stuff in red, as is the Briggs Roach Farm down the South Road too. So a lot of super historic area where you can go through here on Tillinghast Road, and many of those farmhouses are there. So, as historically rich as all those places are, they're actually not what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk about 10 other places. As Tom said, I want to take you on a little bit of a virtual tour, and there are 10 spots around Frenchtown that I'd like to talk about this evening. So, here we go. Ready? 10 spots. Hopefully I'll be done in about 40 minutes. I think a trip through town and through the town's history has to start at the Davis Memorial Wildlife Refuge, which abuts the Hunt River. So I don't know if you're familiar with this location. It's a fun little spot in town. There's Route 4 now that cuts this whole part out. There's this little section of Greenwich that's kind of cut off here. You come down Frenchtown Road, you came down Davis Road here, the entrance to the Wildlife Refuge is right there on your right. And the Wildlife Refuge actually extends all the way down. All this land is all preserved all along the 4 and the Hunt River. And that's a significantly historic area for our town. This protected area contains marshland that was once known as the Great Bog Meadow. And it was critically important to the first English settlers. In fact, it was the resource that made settling here even possible. That's because the bog meadow produced wild bog hay. Until the town's farmers were able to cultivate their own robust supplies of hay, they needed this wild hay to sustain their livestock through the winter. So vital was the bog meadow that the early town council formally allocated shares of it to each of the local farmers. So here you can see again the dailies and crowd. You can see Thomas Fry right up here. The price number is 4 shares at the bog meadow. 4 shares of wild hay in the bog meadow. And you kind of look down the list, see some other names like Tillinghast, and Tillinghast Road, of course, is named for the Tillinghast family. You can see Joshua Davis, he's the namesake of Davisville. So they were all getting shares of that bog meadow. That's how vital it was for them. Mowing the hay was done manually using a scythe. The hay was then piled onto 2 parallel poles that were placed 2 feet apart. 2 men picked up the ends of the poles, they shook off the excess water, and they carried the hay to a sunny area to dry. Mowing bog hay was so essential to these people that really they could not have survived in the early days of settling here without it. The second place of importance in Frenchtown is the settlement, of course, that gave it its name. So I want to talk some about that. It was centered on present-day Airault Street, right? That's Airault Road. So right there, this French Huguenot settlement was actually centered right there on Airault Road. And it was actually named for the group's leader, who was Pierre Airault, I guess you could say, right? So Pierre Airault was the leader, and that road was actually named for him. As the first English farmers were just getting established in East Greenwich, another group forged its way into the wilderness. In 1686, 45 families arrived here, completing a long journey that began on the west coast of France. Known as the Huguenots, they were French Protestants. The group's migration was triggered by a proclamation from the Catholic King Louis XIV that made Protestantism illegal. Every French Protestant was forced to either convert to Catholicism or get out of town. They had to emigrate. And this group chose the latter, traveling first to England and then to the New England colonies. After arriving in Boston, they sought to establish an independent sanctuary where they could peaceably practice their faith and maintain their native traditions and language. Naturally, Rhode Island, the land of religious freedom, religious liberty, was an enticing place for a land purchase, and the group found a willing seller. Unfortunately for the Huguenots, it was an unethical broker, is what I'm trying to say, who sold them the land, and that the land had already been granted to a number of Englishmen. Unaware of the conflicting land claims, the French families landed at Thistle Cove in Wickford. They then hiked into the East Greenwich wilderness and began to build their homes here. They laid out 50 house plots. Along both sides of Frenchtown Brook. So this schematic is a reproduction of one that originated in 1686, pretty incredibly, and I want to give you a little tour of this map because it's pretty darn cool. So this road right here is South County Trail, which is interestingly called the Great Road on the way to Boston. So the reference to the fact that it's a great road, and this would lead its way up to Boston as they kept going north. At this time, Frenchtown Road did not exist. It would have been built right along here. In fact, it was built just shortly after the Huguenots were here. Actually, while some of them were still here. The Frenchtown Road is here, South County Trail here. This is the Little Frenchtown Brook, which interestingly they call the Great River, running to the east, which our French speaker here knows as the east. The Great River running to the east. It was a little stream, but they called it the Great River. And then just below that is the Great Road running by the river into the woods. And what this is right here is the current Awalt Road. So for anyone who lives there or nearby there, it's exactly the same configuration today. The road sits right here with the brook just to the north of the road and the house lots just to the south. So anybody in the room here who maybe lives over here, you're living right up, there you are. You grew up right on top of the former Huguenot settlement then. So this is exactly where that was located. A couple of things I want to point out real quick. On South County Road, here's Pierre Payot. This was his lot, so he actually lived right along South County Trail. And here, because I did take French at high school, at East Greenwich High School, here is La Terre pour l'Église and La Terre pour l'École. That's the land for the church, and the land for the school was also right here along South County Trail. A couple of the quick things to point out. Down here are the great lots that belong to the home lots. And what that means is, here's where their village was, this is where they farmed. And it was the same settlement situation for the broad town of East Greenwich. We have down by the Inland Harbor where the homes were, the village area, but then the farming all happened down here in the western section of town. The Huguenots set their settlement up the same way. We had village with homes, and then they had their farms further to the south. This is where Camp Fogarty is today, which is where they farm. Over here, the last thing I'll point out is there's the meadow ground. So this is the Great Bog Meadow again. For them, that remember the bog, this is all presented geometrically, but the bog meadow is kind of coming along to the east and the south. And so they too had found great value and importance in being able to access the Great Bog Meadow. So in the area of the house lots, the Huguenots dug 25 foundations that were 15 feet square, and they erected dwellings that each had a corner chimney and a thatched roof. Here's another view of the area of the Huguenot settlement. This map was created later in the 18th century, and it marks the property lines of the English settlers. So here now we can look at South County Trail coming down, and now here it is in the 18th century, Frenchtown Road has been built. So here's Frenchtown Road, Tillinghast Road, of course, South County Trail. So there's that area we can now start to see the French settlers the English settlers coming in. Here's Richard Briggs with his farmhouse. Here's Daniel Briggs we talked about, so his farm has been established. Is Joshua Davis of Davisville, and now the part of the Tillinghast farm here in the center, which of course the namesake for Tillinghast Road. So that's something that's going on here. Also, we can see the Great Bog Meadow again. So it's coming all the way down here, and here it is still where we still have it preserved today. So the French people, of course, here's Frenchtown Brook. It's not marked here, but that is where Awalt Road is right here. So this is where the village area was. And you can see evidence of their farming here, and that even in the 1700s, they showed on the map the French orchard, and they showed remnants of the settlers around the spring here where they would have farming. So this again was the farming area for the Huguenots. This was the village area for them. Okay, making sense? But of course, in this farming area, they built a grain mill. I want to make that point, and they planted orchards and vineyards using seeds that they brought from France. So that's when we see this French orchard. It was noted because it was the plants there, the vegetation had originated in France. But of course, the presence of the French people was not appreciated by all these English settlers that had claimed this land. So they began a pressure campaign to evict the French families. And it got pretty nasty at times. In the summer of 1691, Pierre Hérault issued a complaint to the colonial government, writing, "We were molested by the vulgar sort of people, who fleeing down our fences laid open our lands to ruin, so that all benefit thereby we were deprived of. Ruin looked on us in a dismal state, our wives and children living in fear of the threats of the many unruly persons." So the French refugees resisted this intimidation for a while, but within 5 years of their arrival, most of them vacated the land. At that point, the families moved to other French Protestant communities in places like New York. So although their time in East Greenwich was brief, the ill-fated Huguenots, of course, live on in the name Frenchtown. So here we go, on to stop 3. Our third stop, for this I want to jump ahead a century. And here now the Revolutionary War has been won, and America is getting its legs as a new nation. Enter the Tillinghast factory, which was located within the confines of today's Frenchtown Park. It was part of the early industrialization that made America an economic power. Industrialization began, of course, in 1790 when Samuel Slater successfully spun yarn using machinery powered by a water wheel in Pawtucket. That technological breakthrough spawned the Industrial Revolution, and between the years 1810 and 1815, about 75 textile mills were established in Rhode Island. The Tillinghast factory was one of those early mills. It was constructed between 1812 and 1814 by members of the Tillinghast families, descendants of Pardon Tillinghast himself. Fortuitously for the Tillinghast, their land contained one of the few biggish streams in East Greenwich. They constructed a dam on Frenchtown Brook to create the needed water supply. They then created a wood frame mill building that was 4 stories high and had a water wheel 3 stories tall. As was typical of the new American factory system, the Tillinghast provided housing for their workers, and whole families were employed, including children. At the Frenchtown factory site, there were 4 tenement buildings and a general store. The mill spawned a flurry of commercial activity in the town. Teams of oxen hauled raw cotton from the waterfront and brought finished product back to the waiting ships. Meanwhile, there was a cottage industry of work-from-home weavers in Frenchtown. The factory subcontracted them to turn its thread into finished cloth using their own looms at home. So today the factory site lies in ruins within Frenchtown Park, but there are many remnants to see if you haven't done that hike, including the mill pond and the spillway, but also intact are the stone foundations of the mill building and the workers' dwelling. That's stop number 3. On to stop 4. Continuing westward, let's talk about one of the town's first schools. It was located on Frenchtown Road, west of Tillinghast Road, where the Frenchtown Baptist Church now stands. So most of you probably know what it is. Dave, right around the corner. So the official name of the school was the Frenchtown Catholic Seminary, and it was founded at about the same time as the East Greenwich Academy. Unfortunately, we don't know much about it, and if anybody knows any more, I'm hungry for more information on it, but we don't know much about it. But from the little bit of evidence we have, I believe that it was a girls' school. And although the words Catholic Seminary are probably triggering many of you, mostly my sisters included, you're thinking of priests, but it does not appear the school was affiliated with the Catholic Church in any way. The term Catholic likely meant universal, and in early America, the term seminary referred to a school where daughters of farmers would study high-level academics and would receive training in social graces and religious values. So I think it was an all-girls academy, and if so, it would have been quite unique at the time. One of only a limited number of those in the U.S. At the time, in this period of 1804, 1805. So I said the school was chartered and funded around 1804, 1805, and it was a lottery game that was used to raise the capital. Lotteries were typical fundraising methods in early America. A building was then erected on present-day Frenchtown Road, which was known for many decades as Seminary Road. We can see it on the map here from 1831. So this map is 1831, so it's tough to see, but kind of a blurry map. But what we have here now again is Frenchtown Road, which at this time was called Seminary Road. Here is South County Trail, and here is Tillinghast Road. Interestingly, here for the discussion of what's Frenchtown in 1831, they thought it was pretty big, going all the way, obviously, to kind of the western edge of town and to find Frenchtown. But I find it fascinating that when you look at this whole map of East Greenwich, the people who put this together for the state around, they called out just a couple things. One was the seminary, and you can see a few buildings there on Frenchtown Road where the seminary was located. And then the Tillinghast factory, which at the time was called the Mountain Oak Factory. So really, those are the only two things really kind of majorly pointed out on this entire map of East Greenwich in 1831. So the school faced trouble from the beginning. It burned down a year after opening, but was rebuilt. Then, following another unknown disruption, a third building was erected in 1822. You are seated in that building. This was the last home of the Frenchtown Seminary. I'll explain how it got here a little bit later. So here is a photo of the building in its original form at its original location. On the weekends, the school was used by a group of Baptists for religious services. And in fact, the building was designed for that dual use. That explains why there's two doors. For church services, the women used one door and the men used the other door. In the mid-1800s, the school dissolved, and from then on, the seminary was used exclusively by the Baptists for worship purposes. In 1853, the congregation added a vestibule to the front, here we are, and they added a belfry on top, fully converting it from a school to a church. And as you walked in today, you probably felt like you were walking into a church, because that was the last manifestation of the structure, was as a church. And because of the building's origins as a school, it was always known as the Seminary Baptist Church. Jumping ahead, stop number 5. I want to go back to this side of South County Trail, and let's look at an early public school. 24 years after the Frenchtown Seminary was founded, the General Assembly began making funds available for public education. That year, the East Greenwich school system was established. The plan was to provide 3 months of schooling, free to any student, and the town established 5 public school districts. District 1 was in the village, and the 4 others covered the western farming sector. The town then constructed a schoolhouse for each school district. The District's 5 schoolhouse was on South County Trail, a few hundred yards south of Frenchtown Road. The building still exists and is today used by the Happy Hearts Daycare, so maybe you've seen that sign out front. Of the 5 original schoolhouses in the town, it is one of only 2 that still survive. The District 1 schoolhouse still exists on Duke Street along the water near the waterfront, but it has been converted to a residence, but you can still recognize it as a schoolhouse if you went by tonight. Like the seminary, the schoolhouse had 2 doors, one for boys and one for girls. Parents of the students shared responsibility for boarding the visiting teacher, and they provided wood for heating the schoolhouse. Older boys would cut the firewood, and older girls swept and dusted the building. In 1927, the 4 schoolhouses in the western section were consolidated into the Frenchtown Grammar School. That building still exists and is home to the town's Parks and Recreation Department. I'm sure you all know it, and you pass it all the time. But that was a consolidation of the 4 schoolhouses. The current Frenchtown School replaced this then in 1964. Moving on our tour, we're going to go on to stop number 6. So I'm hopping back over to Tillinghast Road, and I want to take you to a lost spot called the Crystal Spring Grove. It was located on the east side of the road, about a half mile south of Frenchtown Road. For a time, this outdoor spot was home to an annual clam bake. The clam bake was a Frenchtown tradition for over a century. Held every August, townspeople came to view it as a staple of East Greenwich summers. Several hundred people would attend the one-day feast. The proceeds went to maintaining and improving the church building we're in. The first clam bake was held in 1881, and those funds helped the congregation buy an organ, which I just discovered today is that organ. Which really cool is the Bailey family, who live on the Fry farm, Fry's Hamlet. They had that in their home. Maybe you can tell us they did, and donated it back to the original church.
My grandmother played that organ for 30 years in
At
the church.
the Baptist church.
And then when they retired the organ, they gave it to the family, and then we gave it back.
Pretty cool, huh? So there it is. So the Frenchtown clam bakes helped fund the purchase of
And
it.
my
Well, she could.
We have all the records, Kyle's and Kyle's.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that before today, but we'll do it afterwards. Yeah, we have lots of great stuff on this. But a couple things I found was, I thought this was pretty interesting. This is the list of supplies for the clam bake in 1925. So if you ever want to throw a clam bake for a few hundred people, this is what you're going to need. And I just want to point out, you're going to need 72 pounds of butter, and a quarter ton of ice. So you need a lot of stuff to throw a clam bake for a few hundred people. And also, I was able also to find a picture of bake masters in 1927. So here they are, the bake masters working on the clam bake in 1927. And to Cynthia's point, staging the clam bake was a community affair. Volunteers organized into committees for ticket sales, for event staffing, decorating, and other tasks. The day before the event, including your grandmother probably, people would set up tables and benches, they peeled and cut potatoes, they hauled cans of water around, and local boys spent the night at the site to keep watch over the setup. A Pendulum article in 1936 reported on the 48th annual clam bake. It wrote, "Crystal Spring Grove, one of nature's beauty spots, with its verdure of brilliant green, enhanced even more so by the showers of the night before, where the Frenchtown clam bake is held, was a sight to behold yesterday, and with the aroma of the clam bake floating on the scintillating fresh air, it made your mouth water in anticipation, while realization made it necessary to let out 2 or 3 holes in your belly." Fancy articles, ice cream, cake, and candy were on sale, and the happy throng in an exuberant mood bought everything in sight. Sounds pretty nice, right? So unfortunately, the hurricane of 1938 decimated that grove. And at that point, organizers moved the event to Fry's Hamlet, which is why Cynthia's family is familiar with it. And there, actually, attendance ballooned to over 700 people would attend the clam bake. Unfortunately, 3 years later, the tradition ended. World War II broke out, and with it came inflation, food shortages, and gas rations that made the feast impossible to put on. So I know, Cynthia, I share the dream that for the 350th anniversary of the town, we're going to have another Frenchtown clam bake. This is a volunteer committee. Let's make it happen. All right, moving right along the tour, we're on to stop number 7. Stop number 7. I want to move back to the other side of Frenchtown, and that whole area along South County Trail got rebranded in the 1940s and was home to the first subdivisions in the western section of town. As this map from 1951 shows, the area was called Sun Valley for many decades. I don't know how many people remember that. Yeah, okay, good. We got some people who remember that was an active term. So you can see on this map, quite interestingly, you can see where the Quick Lane service station is now. That was the Sun Valley service station, and where the liquor store was across the street was the Sun Valley Grill. And as you look down across this, you'll see the word sun used everywhere. This was Sun Valley. So the origin of the name Sun Valley isn't clear to me. If anybody has thoughts, well, I'll love to hear it at the end of this year. But I think it probably came from the marketing mind of a man named Harry Lewis. Harry Lewis was a former professor at Rutgers and established one of the largest poultry farms in New England on South County Trail north of Frenchtown Road. In fact, he owned most of the land on the east side of Route 2 all the way to the southern edge of town. Harry's poultry farm was also destroyed by the hurricane of 1938, and at that point, he shifted his enterprise to real estate development. This sign still exists, by the way, on his real estate office. His projects took advantage of the influx of Navy personnel due to the construction of Quonset. So near the northern end of Davisville, convenient to the military bases, he built a small subdivision along Frenchtown Road. Laid out in 1940, the plat centered on Meadowbrook Road. So you probably all know this little plat. It was, in fact, the first subdivision in all the western section of town. So all you people who live in Hiawatha and that, this was the first one. This was the first subdivision. And coincidentally, it occupies the land where the French Huguenots first settled. You can see Ewald Road right there. It isn't a farmhouse now. Its walls are partly down. Its windows are black holes from which jut the gun barrels of vigilant snipers. The battalion members creep forward, inch by inch, bellies to the ground. They hear the sharp, nervous crack of rifles, and the sound is startlingly real. They grimly await the command to charge. It comes. In a yelling wave, they swarm from the underbrush and race toward the enemy's position. The enemy spews forth to meet them, and now, under a murky moon, these future fighting SeaBees engage in violent hand-to-hand combat. There will be casualties, twisted legs and bloody noses when the night is over, but it will be worth it. Sun Valley will have brought the realities of war very close to home. After the war, the area was dormant for several decades, but the Navy ramped it up again during the Vietnam War. Once again, the SeaBees were mobilized and new battalions formed, and their combat training took place in East Greenwich again. In the midst of the Vietnam War, the training installation was rededicated as Camp Fogarty. The name paid tribute to John Fogarty, a U.S. congressman from Rhode Island who died in office that year. He'd been a big advocate for the SeaBees. At the conclusion of the Vietnam War, the Navy once again wound down its operations at the site. At that point, the Rhode Island National Guard picked up the use of Camp Fogarty. As the Navy had done, the Guard used the base for training. It also stationed its fleet and stored equipment there. As the National Guard became more rooted at Camp Fogarty, the force invested in new facilities there. 5 years ago, recent history, it broke ground on an 81,000 square foot command and control center. And when completed, the Guard moved its headquarters here from Cranston. So today, the Adjutant General and his top staff are based at Camp Fogarty, along with 200 full-time National Guard personnel. So pretty cool that we have that in town. Stop number 9, getting close. Just north of Camp Fogarty stands a one-time civic center known as the Frenchtown Community Club. It's now home to the Happy Heart Station, so again, you see that sign. The building was erected almost a century ago. It'll be the 100-year anniversary next year of the building, on land donated by Harry Lewis. The goal of the clubhouse was to promote neighborliness in Frenchtown. Consistent with that charter, the construction of the building was a community affair. To create the foundation, club members collected stones from their farms, and all the construction work was done by volunteers using donated equipment. Inside, there's a large fireplace. Unfortunately, it's covered over at the moment, and its interior face was designed to symbolize the spirit of fellowship, with each member contributing a unique stone from their farm. So I'm really excited to pull back that wall someday and see that piece of artwork that these farmers have created. During the 1920s and 1930s, the Frenchtown Community Club was the scene of social activities like an annual harvest supper. It also served as a meeting place for the 4-H Club, Cub Scouts, and other local groups. When World War II broke out, the clubhouse was given a new purpose. It became a USO club, providing a home away from home for Navy men and women who were based at Quonset and trained at Sun Valley. There they could relax in a home-like setting. Thursday nights were movie nights. On weekends, the USO played host to dinner events, game nights, and dance parties. During the course of the war, some 85 Frenchtown volunteers worked with the USO, providing relaxation and comfort to about 100,000 servicemen. And for most of those military personnel, this was the last touch of civilian care before they entered the war zone. Disrupted by the war, the Frenchtown Community Club lost momentum, and with diminished use of the building, the club began leasing it in 1987. In 2005, the organization shut down and donated the building to the town, which now rents it to Happy Hearts. But it's still our property as people who live in the town. For the final stop of this virtual tour, I'd like to bring you back to where we are now, the New England Wireless and Steam Museum. And at this point, I'd like to say a few words about our sponsor, Randy. This 60-year-old museum complex started with this couple, an engineer named Bob Merriam and his wife Nancy. In 1956, they moved to East Greenwich from Providence and purchased the Tillinghast farmhouse, which still survives on the south corner of this property. It is one of the 11 farmhouses that still survive from the 1700s. From here, they commuted to Port Judith, where they owned a marine instruments business. One of the company's most loyal customers was Thomas Watson, who was the founder, of course, of IBM. Watson hired the Merriams to outfit his yachts. When the Merriams came to East Greenwich, they brought with them a passion for antique technology. Seeking to preserve the history of commercial engineering, they, along with some like-minded friends, and people like Randy, set out to establish a museum on a section of their property. In 1964, they opened the New England Wireless Museum in an old cow barn on their property. It contained displays of electronic communication apparatus like telegraph instruments and radios. And if you haven't been to this museum complex yet, I encourage you to go. It's still a cow barn, and these original exhibits are still there. It's pretty cool to kind of touch back to this time period and see those exhibits. A few years later, Bob set out to expand the scope of the museum. He had a growing interest in preserving steam-powered engines, the machinery that drove the Industrial Revolution. So in 1971, the team constructed a new steam building. Then, in 1972, the museum added this building to the site. At the time, the former seminary school and the church sat across the road and was at risk of demolition because the Baptists wanted to build a larger church, the one that stands there now. When our society got wind of the plans to demolish it, it intervened with a proposal to move the building here, and the Miriams, who were active members, agreed. A second historic building was acquired in 1983. Bob and other museum colleagues rescued a wireless telegraph station that faced demolition in Point Judith. The 1907 station originally sent news to Block Island via Morse code, and later communicated with steamships traveling between New York City and New England. After separating the building into 3 sections, a team of volunteers transported it here, where it was reassembled. So you'll see that as you drive past. You can probably make out the building, and so as you go back to your car, you'll see it standing right here as well. Now designated as a National Historic Landmark, it is the oldest equipped wireless station in existence. So, there you have it. 10 places where history is hiding in Frenchtown, from the bog meadow that enabled the settlers to survive, to an early venture in industrial production, to combat training in World War II, to the storied life of this building. There's a lot here for history diehards like us to appreciate. So thanks for taking that forward with me. So now it's time for any comments? Yes. Questions? Comments?
There are still remnants of the military base in Quonset where they train the Marines here. I'm telling you, just past Peoria property, when you go up the hill on the right-hand side, there's a little red building, that used to be the guardhouse. And there was a gate right across the road.
Super cool. So you're saying the guard is right on Tillinghast Road?
Sorry?
On Tillinghast Road?
Yes.
Wow.
And that house is still there. When you go down further, there's a little pond on the right-hand side. There's a white historic house there, and that little pond, that was all dug up by the engineers. They used it for training.
This is part of the train.
Now, when I moved here like over 50 years ago, George Graham, Mr. Graham used to own his property with the Heritage Hospital. He told me what kind of story, but my son and I were out in my backyard digging up to plant the garden, and we hit another little shells, so called bullet shells. Like big barrels full. And they were all so this whole area.
This whole area was involved in that. Wow, fascinating.
But that little red house is still there.
Fantastic. Oh, good. We take a look tomorrow. Thank you. Everybody heard that? The guardhouse.
Yeah, Mr. Graham's house, the house over here at the farm still exists.
Yeah.
If you remember that house, when we take it in there, have a bread oven where they made bread. And women used to have to reach in, take the bread out, so when they put their hand on the rocks, it was all more like a consumer's over in the house. I'm sure that still exists.
Really cool. Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's great. Any other good anecdotes or other comments to build on that stories? Or... Yeah.
I have a question about the DeWolf Mountain Boat Factory.
Yeah.
Was that the DeWolf's, the slave traders from Bristol?
Good question. I don't know. I'll check that out.
I would be surprised if it wasn't.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? You know, they had a lot of money. They probably were buying up. They're probably buying up factories.
But I wonder what that connection is, because I raised my family in Bristol.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Watch that. Yes.
Two young girls that ribbon cutting pictures.
Yeah.
They're Sarah Sharp and Molly Brown. Robin Sharp.
I'm sure. Really cool. Interesting. Yeah.
You said the steeple and the vestibule was added to this building in 1853?
1853, I'm pretty sure, but correct me if I'm wrong, that's what I thought I found.
Well, the church wasn't incorporated until 1858, and I'm not sure that they owned the property in 1853. So I'm trying to figure out how to jump, because I know it was meeting in this building prior to owning the property. I know, so the school is still ongoing, and they just met.
Yeah, no, that could be in this category of corrections, maybe that date.
Well, I'm not debating it, I'm just trying to figure out how.
Yeah, how that
Because I have
would line
seen hints that the church, I'm the pastor of the church.
up. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Don't definitely go to whatever year you say.
No, so I have the books records and all that sort of stuff. So, but I do know that the church history predates 1858. They just were operating under Mid-Word Baptist Church.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But they were meeting, and this building was still a school at the time.
Yeah,
when they
so,
started.
yeah, that's again, very sketchy records. I'd love to know what you know. It seems to be
I think it's
used
very
for-
sketchy about the seminary. I'm actually not even certain that I'm not sure that the seminary can justify that they moved the property before. So they just had a building and they met there.
Yeah, it could very well be. The little bit I can figure out is it was very common at that time in the early 1800s it wasn't often that a congregation would have its own church building. They often would kind of pair with a schoolhouse because both things were only used part-time, so they would
It was
pair
a religious, it was actually, they considered it a sign of the papacy to have, that's part of Catholicism, to have a building that looked like a church.
Yeah.
So if you go back to before they put the steeple and vestibule on, it's just basically a house with two doors.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that was intentional. That was an intentional design choice.
A simple meeting house.
Yeah.
Dave.
So, Matt, maybe Cynthia and whoever else around remember, so I moved here in 75.
Yeah, I forgot to put that in the presentation.
Yeah,
Rebel
I
plaque?
remember as a kid when we just passed what is now Woodbridge Drive, there was a structure that my mother, I remember telling me then, was the original schoolhouse.
That was the District 4 schoolhouse, correct? Yes.
So that was different than the
That's
cemetery.
different than different than that one. That was the other public school. It said there were 5 public schoolhouses in town, 4 out here in West Greenwich. There was the one that still stands in Frenchtown. There's the one that was called the Tibbet Schoolhouse, typically it was called.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, that's what you think. You said, yeah. But that was a public schoolhouse, not this private school. And that was unfortunately was vandalized. That was vandalized and it broke down eventually. I hope you weren't part of that, David. Any other comments, questions? Yeah, no one back there.
So I climbed up inside the vestibule.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of years ago, and on one of the beams up there, there's a signature from W.B. Arnold, September 14th, 1901. Any idea who he is?
Well, the Arnold family is a huge family in the history of this town. I like to say, I think there's kind of 2 iconic families that made this town. One is, of course, the Fry family. But the Arnolds owned the tavern on Main Street. They owned a big marine shipping business, and they were Baptists, so it's possible there was somebody related to that family.
If you want to stop by the church sometime at the end of next week, I can search the church records and you probably can find it.
Yeah, that's great. What's the name again? I'm going to follow it.
W.B. Arnold.
W.B. Arnold.
1901.
Okay. Yes.
I'd like to say something more about George Graham on this property.
George Graham. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Just for he owned this property that we're on.
No.
You know, across the road, the street is an empty, all the way down the farm that's on the left-hand
Yes,
side.
on the left side.
He owned it out, he raised cattle, cows. And when he died, before he died, he put that property in the land trust with the promise that it would never be developed. It would always be a farm. And it's still a farm to this day. Now, when we moved here, in 1974,
72.
he built one of the new houses along the road here. And he was a wonderful guy. One day he pulls up and he says to me, "You're not going to put an asphalt, my house sits back off the road." He said, "You're not going to put an asphalt driveway here, are you?" I this place is going to look like a parking lot. So for 50 years, I never had a asphalt. Last year, we finally had it.
He's rolling over.
I would not have been very happy.
Great story. Yeah.
I'd be curious to see how many of us here went to the old school across the street when we had multiple grades in one room. I tell my children that, and they think I'm a grandchildren. I was born in like the 1600s
I
or
remember
something. Yep.
Mrs. Ting and Mrs. Peterson.
Yeah, with Mrs. Kirk and Mrs. Green.
Yes.
And it was first and second in one room and third and fourth
Third
in the
floor,
other.
the other, and
And
in the basement.
Yep, and within 1 year, East Greenwich had grown so much that it went to just first grade in one room and second in the other room, and the rest of us all went to Eldridge.
We
That's
didn't
how
go
it
to
is.
Eldridge, yeah, we were in fifth grade.
Oh, fifth grade, yeah, that's, yeah. It just grew so quickly, yeah.
When did that school building close?
I think in 1964, right?
Before.
No, they built Frenchtown.
They built a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1964 when they built the new one. Yes, my sister.
I just want to say thank you for putting this together, because for the preservationists in town, you know, I think the history of Frenchtown doesn't get neglected, the history of the farmers and everything that happened here. It's great to highlight it, and I hope you.
Well, it's been fun to study because I could have done 20 points of history, obviously, I just only had time for 10. And the thing that blows me away about this town, and we all just going to feel so blessed about it, this is just one little corner of the town. There's so much more. And so it's a super historic place. And so thanks for your support of the Preservation Society. I think that's a good note to end on. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And,